Welcome back, friends. In this video, let's take this photograph and turn it into this using Luminar NEO. If you're new to photo editing or Luminar NEO for that matter, my goal through this video is to show you that it's actually really easy using this software to edit a photo. Now, before we get into the edit, I need to just start off by saying what my intentions are. Reason being, somebody always pops up in the comments saying, "You've changed reality, that's not how it was." And in this case, absolutely that will be true, because my intention is to create more of a photographic artwork, just a representation of the scene not being authentic to exactly how it was when I took the photo. However, if you don't like the idea of changing reality in any way, but you just want to enhance your photos, if that is the case, follow along with the initial steps and stop there. Just don't do the creative stuff where we're changing out the sky and things like that. So hopefully this will be a video with a little bit for everyone. Let's get into the edit. I was taking a walk through Castle Hill in the South Island of New Zealand, and we got a bit of everything here. Beautiful snow-capped mountains in the background, this rugged hillside here, the sunlight on the house, and I framed it so we've got these nice lead-in lines taking our eye to the house here. However, there are two things that I'm not really a fan of in this photo, and that is the very plain blue sky. While in reality we all love a beautiful blue sky, it's not really doing much for the visual impact of this photo. And the second thing I don't really like is I feel like the photograph split horizontally into two halves. Where this shadow line creeps across the valley, we've very much got a distinction between this bright foreground and then all the detail in the background. And so I'm going to show you a neat little trick how we can utilize layers to actually change the geometry of our photo, and we're going to be able to end up with more of a panoramic shot whilst keeping intact these lovely lead-in lines that we have here. So before we do any creative changes or even localized corrections in the photo, we want to get the photo looking good globally. Overall, the photo needs to have a good exposure, good contrast, correct white balance, things like that, the absolute basics. And the best place to do that is in the Develop Raw tool here. Now, if you are new to photo editing or a new photographer and you look at all of these sliders in this one tool here, this might be just a little bit overwhelming for you. But don't freak out, there's another tool that we can use to enhance our photos, and strangely enough, it's called Enhance AI. And the easiest way to make your photo look better is just to grab the Accent AI slider, move that up, and Luminar NEO is going to use its AI to make improvements to your photo. So we can take our photo from this to this, improving the color, contrast, exposure, all the things I mentioned before. However, as your skill set improves, you're going to want to do that inside of Develop Raw. Now, here's something you need to know about Luminar NEO. As soon as you make any adjustment to your photo, the option for Develop Raw is just going to disappear. And you might be like, well, where's that gone? Well, it hasn't actually disappeared. It's just that Develop Raw is the first thing you want to do to your photo before you make any other changes. And so what Luminar NEO does is it takes the Develop Raw tool and moves it to the bottom of the stack in that edit menu. So you can always go back to Develop Raw, which will sit at the bottom of your processing at any point that you like. So let me show you that. So as we close Enhance AI down and we come down to Develop, it is no longer Develop Raw. If we open it up, it looks very, very similar. However, we can no longer apply a profile to our photo, and we are now not working on the raw data through this tool. So what we want to do is come to the edit section, and now we can once again see Develop Raw sat here at the bottom of the stack. And so any base corrections we want to make to the photo, we can still jump into Develop Raw and do that. But I don't want Enhance AI up here, so I'm just going to reset that and throw it in the bin. And interestingly, now thrown away that adjustment, the Develop Raw has jumped back and is now available to us. So we will make some global adjustments with Develop Raw, but before I start doing that, an important thing to see is the histogram. Yes, we have one available to us in the curves option here, but if we right click on our photo or option click on a Mac, we can come down here to show histogram. And as I'm sure you guys know, that represents the distribution of the brightness values throughout our photo. We have black on the left, white on the right, and that distribution from darks, midtones, and highlights. And of course there are exceptions to this, but a good rule of thumb is to try and get this histogram to stretch right the way from the left all the way to the right. And that's going to give you a really nice contrast. So for example, if I grab the Smart Contrast slider and push that all the way to the right, you can see how that histogram actually expanded to show the redistribution of those highlights and the shadows. Obviously that is way too much, but we might want to put a little bit of Smart Contrast in. I want to protect the highlights, boost the shadows up, and at some point I definitely want to bring in a lot more information through here. However, if I grab the shadow slider and push that all the way, so all of a sudden we can see the detail reintroduced into this shadow area on the hill here, it's just kind of given our photo a bit of a flat, washed out look. And so what I would like to do is just localize that adjustment through here. So we'll look at that very shortly. But for now, let's boost the whites up, bring the black point down. And if you just want to check that you're not clipping out your highlights or your shadows, you can just turn these little dots on here, and that's going to give you a highlight warning. So you can see where I'm pushing out to red here. That's basically saying that these pixels have now gone white and beyond. And so you don't want to push your pixels too far. And although we haven't crushed things down into black, I just feel like visually that's just getting a little bit too dark, so I don't want to push that too far either. Do let me know in the comments if this applies to you, but I know that some of you have mentioned you're having difficulty with the profiles, so if you are, please let me know. However, the Luminar default profile is actually pretty good, so honestly it's not the end of the world if you end up using that. I want to address the temperature because I feel like this is way too cool as it was shot, and when I was actually there it was a nice warm sunny day, so I want to just boost that temperature up slightly, perhaps just move the tint slightly towards the magenta side. And if we zoom into our house, which is our main protagonist in the photo, we're going to be able to judge the sharpening. So I'm just going to boost the sharpening quite high, 65. That might be a little too high. Yep, 45, I'm happy with that. Now I'm just going to turn off these highlight warnings. For instance, I really don't need to know that the sunlight hitting white snow is turning it to pure white. Okay, let's say we're happy with Develop Raw, close that down, and Structure AI is certainly something else that's worth at least having a play around with. So if we push it all the way to 100, we can see exactly what it's doing through the photo. If you double click it, that's going to reset it, and all of a sudden your photo looks a lot flatter when you take it away. And so we may decide, just as an initial pass, we might just want to add in, say, plus 19, just so it's relatively subtle, but it's just giving the photo overall a nice little pop. So I'll be honest, while I love those lead-in lines, I'm not a big fan of the composition that I currently have. I feel like the top half is visually interesting, whereas that bottom half, all it's got going on for it really is those lead-in lines. So what I want to do is take the bottom half of the photo and actually crush it down so that we still keep the lead-in lines, and the field now only represents about a third of the overall frame. So let me show you how we can do that using layers. Let me show you the crop I'm after. So I'm going to come to the ratio and choose a 16:9, and if I move that up, with the guidelines you can see we've got about a third of the sky, a third of mountains and hills, and now we only have about a third of the field visible. But I feel like we're losing a little bit of the dynamicism of the lead-in lines by just cutting off these wider bits here. Well, what we're going to do is steal the grass and then transform it. So let me show you how we do that. I'm just going to come over to the ratio and just choose 3, and we're going to move this down just so we're selecting the grass only. I can click to apply the crop. And now I can right click and export this. And as long as I'm exporting this with a really high quality, I'm happy as a JPEG. Now if we come back to our crop and we go back to the crop that we actually want, which is the 16:9, and move that up, what we do is come over to the layers section here, click the plus icon to add a new layer, add our grass in as an image, and now we come over and just double click it. And now Luminar has dropped that grass in as a layer. So you can see that if I change the opacity, we do have that as a separate layer. And now all we need to do is just grab the handle. So I'll just reduce the size slightly so I can see the bottom handle. I'm going to grab this and I'm just going to move that up. And now we have our lovely lead-in lines back again. And I don't think anyone's going to notice that the height of the grass has changed slightly. But what we can do just to make sure that we're aligned here is just come into a nice high zoom rate, hold the spacebar key just to move our handle here, and just check that we're happy with the alignment. And I want to make sure this area here where we actually have the fences is actually all lining up nicely. I'll put the opacity to 100%. Yep, I'm pretty happy with that. So we can just click the layer properties to close that down, and we'll go back to fit this in screen. Now, because I want to carry on editing this as a whole, not as individual layers, I'm going to need to export this again, because if I start trying to make any changes now, you're going to see that that's going to apply only to the layer that we've just introduced. Or if I jump down to the bottom layer and make changes, then that's going to apply only to that underlying layer as well. So what we need to do is right click, export that, and now I can bring it in and edit it as a whole. For sure, at the moment, that's a little bit of extra work than we really ideally need. And in future, what I'm hoping 𝗨𝘀𝗲𝗄 will do is actually give us the ability just to merge what's currently on screen to a brand new layer. And I'm sure that will be coming in a future update. But for now, that's a little workaround we can use with layers. Okay, so I've added the photo back in as a single image, and we're now ready to get editing again. One thing I'd like to take care of is bringing a little bit more detail and light into this shadow area here. And so one tool that might be quite nice for doing that is adding a bit of structure. So let's crank this up and see where we want to settle with this. Maybe somewhere around that 35 mark. And while I'm judging the amount I want to set this to, I'm training my eye just to look on the shadow area here. I'm disregarding everything else. But if you want to actually apply a mask before you do this, you certainly can do that, but I'm going to do it posthumously. So I'm just going to jump into the masking section. So we have all of our adjustments here, masking on the right, click that, and I'm just going to go into the mask AI. And let's let Luminar do its thing, and while it does, we'll move our mouse around and look at all those little geometric shapes. And now we should have the option to select the mountains, which we do. And so by clicking that, we're a lot closer to selecting the shadow area that I want. However, we've got a lot of the mountains in the background that I don't want. So how can we address that? Well, we're just going to jump back to the brush section and come to the erase tool. And so now with, I don't know, a strength somewhere around that 47, I can click and start to paint away the areas that I don't want. Absolutely, I could do this with 100% and remove it completely, but I like to do it in passes, and that way we can just make our transition just a little bit smoother. So now if we toggle the eye tool on the structure, we can see this is before, this is after, and the tool is only affecting this shadow area. So that's part of what we're after, but I want to brighten this area as well. And so the quickest way to do that is to borrow the mask. And so we're going to come back into the masking section, come out of the individual tool, and if we come down to the mask actions, we've got a lot of great options here, so we can show the mask to see what we're dealing with. And if that's what we're after using, which it is, I can just copy that mask and now come to another tool such as develop so that I can brighten it up. And let's say we want to just boost the exposure just a little bit for now. I'm going to jump into the masking section, mask actions, and now I can paste that mask that we had before, and now that brightening effect is only going on here. So if I jump back to the adjustments and toggle the eye tool off and on, you can see that we are just brightening that area there. So we could grab the shadows a little bit, boost those up, maybe even go just a smidge brighter with the exposure, and just pull the blacks down just so we're keeping the contrast level good in that area. Because this area is in the shade, it's getting all of its color cast from the blue sky up above, and so we may just want to correct that blue cast, and we can grab the temperature slider, and if I push that all the way, you can see exactly what we're doing. That's a little too strong, but we could set that somewhere around, I don't know, 28. Let's go with that and bump the tint up just a little bit to take out some of those greens. So now we can see our before and our after, before and after with that adjustment. So this next step is about identifying local areas of improvements, specific areas in a photo that you might want to change or enhance. So in this case, we've already addressed the shadow, and the next step that I'm wanting to do is to bring our attention in towards that house. So we'll use a subtle vignette to darken around the edges and bring our attention in, and then I'm also going to darken down the foreground with a gradiated transition so that we also get led in towards the center of the frame. Let's see how we do that. So we'll close that down and come down to the vignette tool here, and basically we just want to crank that amount nice and high so that we can see exactly what's going on and how it's affecting our photo. Let's bring the size in so it's a little tighter on the house as well, and we can play with the roundness just to change the shape of the vignette. And in this case, I don't want anything circular. I want the vignette to better match the actual shape of the frame. Something like that's good. And now this is key. We always want to apply a nice amount of feathering so that the transition is much smoother. For sure, it looks far too strong at the moment, and that is because I set that amount nice and high so that I can see the effect of all these changes here. And if I double click it, so we've got none of the effect, and now we can grab the amount slider. Now we know that the settings are exactly where we want them, and now we can tease it left and right, just looking for that Goldilocks place where everything's just right. Let's go with -42. Here's our before, here's our after. It's pretty subtle. Maybe we'll just bump it up just a little bit more. How about that? 49. Okay, I'm happy with that. The next thing I want to do is just create a gradiated transition just to darken down the foreground and lead our eye to the house. Luminar NEO has a very clever tool that will allow us to do that, and that tool is Relight AI. And you guys who are familiar with Luminar NEO will know that this clever bit of programming actually allows the AI to create a 3D depth map out of our 2D image. It's very cool. We can grab the brightness near slider and bring that down, and that knows that we are talking to the near part of the image. And if I toggle the before and after, you can see that that just helps lead our eye to the brighter part of the image, causing attention to be drawn to that house. Okay, now we're in a place where we can swap out this beautiful blue sky. It's such a shame to see it go, but I feel like I want to add more drama to my photo by adding something more atmospheric. Okay, the sky replacement tool is usually part of the creative set, and so you would find it here. However, for me now, it's sitting in favorites because I've used it a few times. And so I come up here, choose this, and now we can scroll straight past all those blue skies. We don't want anything something lovely like that. We want to find something with a bit more drama. Yeah, that's not too bad. What about dramatic sky 3? Yeah, I quite like that. And if we toggle our before and our after, you can see that the whole mood of the photo has totally changed with the introduction of that sky. So the skies you saw on the list, they're all shipped with Luminar NEO, and they're very good skies. However, a word of caution, if you're serious about swapping out the skies in your photography, I would strongly recommend looking into getting a sky library. If you rely on the photos that come with Luminar NEO, it's just going to stand out like a sore thumb. I recognise those skies from a mile away. I've checked out a lot of sky libraries. I'll put a link in the description below to the one that I think is excellent. High res, all shot on a medium format camera, so very good quality. Another option could be to join the Luminar X membership that I'll again put a link to in the description, because not only do they send out presets every month, but you also get a new batch of skies every month as well. So that's another good way to build a sky library, and it keeps things fresh for you as well. Now I've committed the cardinal sin of sky replacement here. You can see from the beams of light that the sun would probably be somewhere where my mouse is right now. However, you can blatantly tell from the direction of the shadows that in actuality the sun would have been off to camera left right here. So for maximum believability of any sky replacement you do, you want to make sure that the sky you introduce has the position of the sun in the same position that it would have been when you actually took the photo. And that is absolutely not what I've done here. But I'm okay with that, because I'm actually going to show you a little trick that we can do to help better integrate a sky that actually has sun rays in it. And so let's close that down, and let's come down to the sun rays filter, and we want to crank the amount nice and high so we can see what's going on. Choose place sun center, and as I move this over here, we can see the sun start to burst through where the clouds lighten up. But what we're wanting to do here is actually lift the position of the sun up so that our fake sun rays that we're introducing actually match the position of the sun rays that were already there in the sky. And once we're happy with that, we can come down and fine tune the look of the sun rays. So I'm just going to drop the amount down to start with, and I'm going to bring the sun ray length down just so it's not going too far over the field. And ideally what I want to do is actually get some of these rays so they're coming down straight onto the house here. And if I can get them to kind of match this little pocket of light here, while by no means is it going to be perfect believability, it's going to give some sense of plausibility as to this little pocket of light. So we're going to open the rays settings, and that's going to allow us to actually change the distribution of these beams. And so what we can do is actually increase the number of sun rays, or what I prefer to do is actually bring them down. I normally find that gives us a greater sense of believability. And now by using the randomize slider, what we can do is look for a position where those sun rays are actually beaming straight down onto the house. And things are looking quite dark and moody. What I can do is just grab the overall look slider and just bring that up if I want to just brighten things up a little bit. And just like any of Luminar's tools, we can come into the masking section and just say we want to paint that only where we want it. And so we want it just popping through the clouds here, coming down onto the house. Perhaps there were some rays over this side we might want to reintroduce. Oh, not too much going on there, but this is the important part. Let's have a toggle of our before and our after, before and after, and now we've taken the sky that had sun rays in already and introduced some extra sun rays that now bleed over the foreground elements. And if we're happy with the look of it, we may just want to tease down the amount so it's not as aggressive and in your face. Now, staying with the theme of believability here, we only see sun rays as they pass through particles, atmosphere. And so what may help us with the plausibility of this scene is actually using some atmosphere AI. And so I'm thinking we add some haze into this. So if I grab the amount slider and push that all the way up just so we can see what's happening. Don't panic, I know it doesn't look good yet. And I love this, as we grab the depth slider, we're going to see that haze, that fog just start to encroach over the landscape here. You can even see little wisps of cloud in that. So if I toggle our before and our after, again, that is absolutely far too much. But what we can do if we want to is just jump into the masking section, grab our brush, make sure it's in paint mode, not erase, and bring the strength pretty low, somewhere around 19. And now what we can do is actually just start painting that effect in. Oops, I clicked one of the other tools, so I need to jump into the edits, jump back into Atmosphere AI, go back into my masking and re-engage the mask and just paint this in. I'm doing this with a mouse. I'd normally be painting with a Wacom tablet, but I just want to always show you guys that it's quite possible that even if you're only working with a mouse, that you can achieve the results you want. And I'm pretty happy with that. I may just want to take a little bit off away from the house, so I'll just reduce the size of the brush by using my bracket keys and just take that away just from the house itself. And now it looks like we've got some low-lying fog in the valley. As always with our edits, I like to see where we've come from and where we've got to. Where we've come from and where we've got to. That's a big transformation, guys. As with all of my videos, it's more about trying to teach you guys the skills and the tools for photo editing rather than the actual photo edit and the end result itself. However, if we wanted to add just another layer of believability, a good thing to do when you've introduced a new sky or composited element is to actually give a more cohesive color scheme to the photo. And a really great way to do that is with the lookup tables, the LUTs, or as they're called in Luminar, moods. Let's see what we can do. So let's come over to the mood tool, open that up, and this is going to allow us to choose a lookup table. And we could go for anything, Bakersfield, 1990, whatever the look is, it's worth just playing around. But for me in this one, I think I'm going to try unifying these brownie tones using wooden. Let's see if whether adding a bit more contrast can actually help us. Yeah, I quite like that. We can add saturation or take it away, and for this one I'm liking quite a muted, desaturated look. So I'm pretty happy with that. Let's look at our before and our after, and you guys can see we've actually come a really long way. So there you go, my Luminar NEO family. I hope you've got some use out of this video. If you're new to Luminar NEO or photo editing in general, hopefully you can see this is a very powerful photo editor, but it's also ideal for beginners because everything is just slider based. So if you'd like to get your hands on it with a discount, I've got a link in the description below. It's also going to help me out with my channel, so I appreciate that very much if you use that link. Thank you so much for watching. I love creating these videos, and if you've enjoyed watching, there's another one that you might enjoy as well. So I'll see you over there.